a.m. So we're going to kick off this edition of the NSBA's webinar series. Today we're featuring Chris Foster from Complete Technologies. He's going to be talking about cyber threats and how you can protect yourself and your business. Chris has asked that if you have any questions, he'd love to take them, but if you can leave them in the chat panel, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. If you leave them there, we'll get to them once Chris's presentation is finished. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Chris. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm assuming you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be talking about something that could potentially ruin your business. Isn't that a nice thing to start off with? Unfortunately, it's true. And hopefully we can help you get on the right track if you aren't already. So today, we take a deep dive beyond the bunny hug into cybersecurity. Actually, we're going to keep it light and informative and not get too technical. The goal is to create awareness, help you create an action plan, as well as provide you with some tools to get started and, of course, keep it short. My name is Chris. As Andrew mentioned, I'm with Complete Technologies here in Saskatoon. We are a managed services provider and a member of the NSBA. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Saskatoon. I have 25 years plus of experience with Canadian US business systems. Now, a little housekeeping, Andrew touched on this, but rather than asking questions with voice, if we just put them in the chat. So as we go along, if a question pops into your mind, just throw it into the chat and we'll get to it at the end, but make sure you put it in there so you don't forget. And more than likely your question will help someone else as well. At the end of the presentation, Andrew's going to go through the questions and I'll answer them as best as I can. Also, just important note that we will be focusing on general questions today rather than detailed technical questions. However, if you do have a technical question, maybe something that's been troubling your business that involves some detail, my email is up there now and it'll be there at the end so you can reach out to us directly. Okay, so let's get started. Where does your business stand with cybersecurity? Businesses in Saskatchewan are victims of malware and ransomware on a daily basis. And I'd be surprised if there's anyone in this Zoom that hasn't encountered a cyber threat either personally or knows of someone who has. The threat is rampant and it'll only increase, especially now that more and more people are working remotely and from home. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and a few minutes of cyber incident to ruin it. And the point here is that cybersecurity needs have to be taken seriously. And surveys show that more than 70% of businesses don't have anything in place or don't have staff on hand to help them. So the recent incident with the city of Saskatoon last year highlights this locally. Worldwide, businesses are losing over $600 billion a year due to cyber security related threats, and that's only going to increase. So we're going to cover some of the basics where you can really begin to bulletproof your own business. So what is your cyber strategy? And at the end of the day, there's two options. Option one is to build your office on a remote mountain, disconnected from the world. Or option two, you can put the time and effort into a thorough cybersecurity strategy. And as appealing as option one might be to some of us, it's probably not viable for your business. So we're going to focus on option number two, go through the strategy, go through some of the concepts, and provide you with a toolkit. So your business should have a cybersecurity strategy and a disaster recovery plan. Now, not every business will be the same. For example, a small business owner might just make sure that his or her laptop is not shared with the kids. If they are more serious about their business, they will have an offsite backup. Maybe they keep their malware and antivirus up to date. And you might even find the odd owner that subscribes to a security newsletter or actually takes some training on etiquette for security. That right there is really a basic cybersecurity strategy. And it's actually more than some businesses are doing right now. So we'll get into a little more detail. We aren't going to get into the nitty-gritty or the nuts and bolts of strategies or disaster recovery plans in this session, but at the very least, your business should know that you have a reliable backup that is stored offsite or in the cloud, and updated defense software. So that is your virus protection and your malware software. If you don't have those in place, it's not a matter of will anything go wrong, it's just a matter of when it'll go wrong. So we can break down the main elements of cybersecurity into planning, prevention, and protection. So planning is simply sitting down with key individuals to create a strategy. So if you're an individual owner, I guess that would be you and maybe a consultant or your IT guy. You might have an IT team or a support provider like Complete. We do that as well. Using guides such as a toolkit will give you, you can now create a framework for a cybersecurity strategy. The next step is prevention. So prevention is really the plan in action. The plan will always need to be updated as things change, but it's important that there are people in roles to ensure the plan is carried out. So this would be your IT department, your HR department, as there's various elements of carrying out the plan. And then protection, this is the result of planning and protection, or planning and prevention coming together. And we can go through a simple example. I'm sure you've all heard of ransomware. So if we just look at being able to restore data after a ransomware attack. So imagine that you had a plan, and part of your prevention was offsite backups every 15 minutes. And even though you educated your staff on cybersecurity threats, you were hit by a sophisticated attacker with the exceptional social engineering skills, and that they fooled your employees. So unfortunately, they were able to get that employee to click on the wrong thing. Now the attackers are delighted because they've encrypted your data, and you have to send them 2 Bitcoin to get it back. However, because you had a plan and prevention in place, you now have protection, and your team can simply restore the data from 15 minutes before the attack and carry on. And probably you'll want to ask that employee to not click on that anymore. So if we look at planning, we'll look at each component: planning, prevention, and protection. A cybersecurity audit is a good place to start. So we're going to provide some tools for you to self-assess, or you could get a professional in to help you with this. But basically, it goes through your system, finds the major weaknesses. You want to focus on those first. So often, those are things like backup, firewall, user education, those kinds of things. You can definitely start training your employees at the same time you're building your plan. There's online courses, local trainers, where you can build your own course. There's many elements of planning. We won't go through all of them in this session. We do provide information on them in the toolkit. And depending on your type of industry, there could be more or fewer of these elements. For example, if you're in health and finance, it's often a requirement that your data, your personal private data of your clients be stored in Canada. So if you were backing up to the cloud, you have to make sure that the computers it's on, they're located in Canada, not in the United States. Another big part of your plan will be to create policies for passwords, acceptable use, privacy, email communication, and more. So as fun as that sounds, it is necessary to do, but again, with a toolkit and assistance from someone, you can get templates and get that underway. So start by creating a security plan and educating your employees on best practices. Regardless of how detailed your strategy needs to be, you simply need to start it. Like I said, over 70% of small businesses have no plan in place, and those that do, it might not be a fully fledged plan. At the same time, get your employees trained on best practices. Get it started, set a date, and set a date for your first version of it to be completed, even if it's not perfect the first time, as long as you have the main elements in it. And here's a tip: adding best practices training to your onboarding process. So when you bring a new employee, if you incorporate cyber best practices into their employee training, it's going to reduce the likelihood of a successful cyber attack against you. And what it really does is it reduces the number of happy clickers in your business. And for those of you who don't know what a happy clicker is, they're the main threat to any business. And basically, they're just people that like to click on things. So you just have to educate them so that they're not doing that. Now, prevention, this is the team effort between different roles and departments and basically implementing the plan. So commonly HR and IT will be involved. Prevention practices on the employee side, such as education, are just as important, if not more important, than best practices on the IT side. And remember those happy clickers? So there is currently no technology available to completely protect you from those individuals. Your employees must be educated. There are some artificial intelligence products being developed, but they're not quite there yet. So until we get to that point, education is the best defense. Again, many elements to prevention. Some will be necessary, some not, depending on the business that you're in. But at the very least, your organization should have, as mentioned, a secure offsite backup, preferably encrypted, and your IT person should be able to help you with that. Please do not put it in a folder on the same hard drive as your data. A good backup makes ransomware just a headache rather than a disaster. So if you have that backup, you can always go back to it. Protection from viruses and malware, these are solutions that you must have in place. Strong passwords, so make them strong, and do not use the same passwords everywhere. So get a password manager, password manager software if you have a lot of logins, but don't use weak passwords or reuse them. And of course, user education. So communicate with your IT team to ensure your plan is implemented. So in order for prevention to work, you must be in regular communication with your IT team to ensure that the plan is being implemented and adhered to. So oftentimes a plan will be created and then it's kind of put in and then it's forgotten about. So you have to make sure that there's constant communication. And even if the plan is underway, start elements of prevention that you can start immediately. So you might decide, we want to do a full-blown plan, but if you don't have a good backup and that's part of the plan, start doing the backup before you finish the plan. Set an expectation for regular security reports that your management team can review. So these reports are basically your balance sheet for your cyber safety, which links directly to potential expenses that could be massive if you're not prepared and you aren't reviewing these reports. So if you rely on data or the integrity of your data of clients as part of your business, you want to make sure that reviewing these reports is happening on a regular basis. So they would include backups, employee education updates, reports on cyber threats that maybe have been stopped, and just the general effectiveness of your current strategy. So at a minimum, you should have reports from your IT department on critical areas of IT, especially backups, and education from their HR. So did I mention reports? So you're hearing this a lot. I'm repeating this to you, and it's intentional. So it's important that with the plan, you have this reporting, just like you do with the books. You check that balance, your accounts receivable, you're on top of that. This is the same kind of thing. Okay, now protection. So this is the result of your plan and prevention coming together. It's not unlike if you were to create an exercise plan and then go hit the gym hard, do your training. Now that those two elements have come together, you're a better athlete. So now you can compete better in your favorite sport and have an increased chance of not getting injured. So the plan and the prevention resulted in the protection. There will always be cyber threats out there attempting to get into small businesses. Over 43% of cyber threats target small businesses. So you have to make sure that you have a solid plan in place, and you're much less likely to fall victim. Again, many elements of protection, a lot of them cross over with planning and prevention. Protection is just a different stage. So if we go back to the ransomware attack, so you originally came up with a plan that you're going to back up every so often. Then you implemented the prevention of actually doing the backups. And then if ransomware comes along, you restore your data and there's your protection. And then after reviewing the attack, you maybe go back and take a look and say, hey, there's a hole in our education here. We have to train our employees better in this one area. A reliable backup can save your business from a ransomware attack, but not information theft. So if a database of private information is stolen by an employee knowingly or unknowingly, or maybe an external threat, your backup does nothing to protect you against that. So there are many possibilities. We've covered some of the basic ones, but you do have to give it a thorough analysis depending on your type of business. So your team must plan, prevent, and protect thoroughly. Are your employees educated on social engineering and other threats to your private data? So social engineering, if you're not familiar with that, is is more of an elaborate effort to get to know what your business is doing, and it's maybe more common with larger businesses, but it's becoming common with small business now too. So monitoring what's going on in emails, and then being more personal with the attack. So you probably have heard of phishing. Something that's more common now is called spear phishing, and they call it spear phishing because it's targeting one person instead of just throwing a mass email to a bunch of people. And these are a lot more convincing. So you need to educate your employees. We've talked about this several times, and the weakest link in any business system today is the employees, unfortunately. Especially now that they're working remotely and possibly working from personal computers and phones. So education is a must-have. Okay, so there is no silver bullet. It is necessary to have a robust cybersecurity plan for full protection. So at the end of the day, like most things, there is no silver bullet. Your cybersecurity plan must be well thought out and multi-layered. The more complex your business, probably the more complex your plan. The more sensitive the information that you have, probably the more robust your plan. If you have 5 employees or more, you may want to engage several professionals such as lawyers, trainers, and security professionals to help you assist you with that. Okay, so that is the presentation in a nutshell, and now we're gonna move on to questions. Before we do that, though, this just gives you quick instructions how you can get the toolkit. So if you go to completecyber.ca, when you enter the information there, I'll get that, or you can just email me directly, and then I'll get that toolkit out to you, as well as some links to some resources from the Government of Canada, and basically just a bunch of tools that you can use in-house to get things started and figure out where you're at. We are also launching a security newsletter, and that will be released on a quarterly basis, and the toolkit is also updated on a quarterly basis. So if you're interested in getting that, just reach out to me. Okay, so now it's time for Q&A, and as mentioned before, we'll just go through the questions in the chat, and I believe Andrew will go through those questions, and we can deal with them one at a time.
Okay, awesome. So the first one up here is, what motivates hackers? Why do they target small business?
Well, the main reason for most of these attacks is simply money. So in Saskatoon here, I personally know of probably over $2 million worth of cyber attacks. And these happen even small businesses. Like it could be a small business like a plumbing company, and someone clicks on an email, they don't have the proper safety in place, they encrypt the data, and it has all their customer information, their inventory. So for that business to get that data back, they're going to pay some money. Some of these hackers live in areas of the world where a dollar is worth a lot of money. So even if they were to get $10,000 out of that business, that is a big win for these hackers. So reaching out to SMBs is something that they do, because SMBs, they make up a big part of the economy. So there's a lot of money there to be had.
Next question is, can you speak to the value/need for bandwidth relative to getting the value from a firewall/perimeter defense device?
Okay, well, that question is a little more technical, but in general, your bandwidth is not overly important for being protected against cyber attack. If you had more specifics you wanted to get answers to on performance, just send me an email, and I can have Justin or Dave reach out to you and talk about the technical details.
Sorry, questions are moving down in the chat. So password changes are a pain in the butt. Is there a simple solution to changing passwords?
There are different options out there. So the short answer is no. You have to be diligent with your passwords. To make it a little easier to change them, you can use password generators, but you still have to use them. So a password manager can definitely help with that. Of course, you need at least the password, and your password manager has to be good, of course. And then it basically encrypts and manages your passwords for you. And there's a number of them available. That'll be included in the information that you receive. Another option is using multi-factor authentication tools. And these are basically electronic systems that automatically generate passwords for you, and you might already be familiar with them. With at work, you might need to use 2FA or multi-factor authentication to get into your email. So it hasn't gotten to the point where it's super simple, but it's definitely getting there. And with some of the multi-factor authentication, you can streamline your business.
One of the reasons people put off security is because they're busy and the threats aren't always affecting them on a day-to-day basis. So it gets pushed to the side. For the typical small business owner, small or medium business owner, what is some low-hanging fruit that is lower effort but is commonly targeted by hackers?
Okay, so yeah, no, that's definitely the case. If you look at the stats, it clearly shows that most small businesses don't know what to do, or they think they don't have the money to do it. And I think the average annual spend on small businesses in North America is $500 a year on cyber safety, and that's not really nearly enough unless you have some knowledge in-house. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have a really good backup, and a really good backup means that it's backed up for a period of time that you're okay of losing work. So if you can lose a day of work, then backing up once a day is fine. If you can't lose more than 15 minutes of work because you have a large number of employees, then you have to have a backup every 15 minutes. And that should be replicated offsite to a secure data center, like Virtual Data Corp if you're in town. And that's step one. Some people just take the backup home. That's fine too, as long as you are okay with the amount of downtime between backups. Then the antivirus and malware software, you have to have that in place. And probably the most important, the cheapest thing you can do, really, if you just did it internally and used online resources, would be to educate your staff. So the majority of cyber attacks happen because someone clicks on something in an email that they're not supposed to click on because they weren't educated to properly identify that it was a threat. So this goes back to those happy clickers. So you have to educate your staff and put some policies in place to protect against that. So backup, software, and the user education, with those three, you can really narrow down the chances of you getting attacked. And then you might want to look into some advanced firewall setup and those kinds of things as well.
Thanks, Chris. What extra measures do home-based employers and employees need to take with today's COVID working from home scenario?
That's a good question. So when the COVID crisis really hit here in Saskatchewan, and everyone was basically ordered to work from home, we had to quickly get thousands of users from the office into their home and make it as secure as possible. Now, we were in a situation that we had software in place to do that. So if you own a business, then I guess the liability kind of rests on your shoulders to help your employees. But a simple solution would be remote access over a VPN. And if you're not familiar with a VPN, your IT person would know what that is. So that's a good step to make sure your connection from home to work is secure and encrypted. And then at home, you have to make sure that your employees are educated to know things like don't leave your computer logged in if the kids can come by and do things like browse the web on a work computer. And if they're using personal devices, then you have to be extra careful because you don't know what they're going to be putting on their personal device and connecting to your network. We highly recommend that you don't allow your employees to use personal devices. And if you do allow them to do it, your IT department should be ensuring that they're locked down in a secure fashion. So if you're an employee, if you're an employer, you should talk to your IT department about some of those steps. And if you're an employee, I would reach out to your employer and say, are we set up to be safe from home? And if you have any concerns, like if you know that you haven't been told to log out of your computer when you're not using it, there's a good example that maybe the awareness isn't there.
So one for me, you've spoken about secure backup. What kind of mitigation would occur if a company regularly stores all their files in the cloud via SharePoint, OneDrive, or another service?
You mean as far as being vulnerable to attack?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And the day will come, probably, when one of those cloud services gets hacked. But when you're looking at cloud services, you can factor into account that there's Fortune 100 companies using similar services. And so those solutions, like you mentioned, SharePoint. So Microsoft has a solution called Azure, which is a secure cloud solution, and large corporations use that. So if you use cloud solutions that are being used by Fortune 100 companies, it's about as safe as you're going to get when you're in the cloud. You can go with private cloud solutions. I mentioned Virtual Data Corp in town here. We work with them pretty much exclusively for our clients that do need a very secure cloud solution. And then the endpoint, which is typically the user in this case, the endpoint of your network are all these remote users that have access to these resources. That would be the other vulnerability, right? So if you have things stored on SharePoint, someone leaves their laptop open and someone comes over and deletes all the files, that'll create a problem. Those services are backed up, and if you have an IT team, they'll know how to restore them. So you're relatively safe in the cloud if you're using the right kind of cloud.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Chris. EFT payments are becoming more of the norm during the current scenario. Are these types of payments or transfers ever in jeopardy of being intercepted before getting to the intended recipient?
So anything that's transmitted has the chance of being intercepted and decrypted. But today's technology, certain levels of encryption are deemed as safe because there's no known way to decrypt them. So banks do use high-level encryption when they transfer the information between them. So if you're doing EFT payments using an established bank, there should be no problem with that.
Okay. Question from Andre. Can you speak about security audit services?
Sure. So security audits could be carried out by, if you have a knowledgeable IT team, and maybe they're not up to speed on security, you could probably give them a template. In our toolkit, we have some resources there, and they could use that as a guide and then figure out what kind of education they need. But there's also companies that can provide that. We provide that. There's other companies that do provide that service. And if you don't have a security specialist in-house, it's probably a good idea at the very least to get someone like us in for a consultation. And then it can be determined if you can handle it internally or if you need to get someone externally. If you're an individual person, you can probably use the toolkit and get yourself fairly secure without needing a full audit. But again, you have to really take into consideration what you do. So if you're a financial advisor and you have a bunch of critical information on your laptop, but like you're a small financial advisor, you probably should be taking extra steps. If you are a drywall installer and you keep your appointment book on your laptop, you won't have to have as robust of a solution in that case.
Okay. I'm not seeing any further questions. I'll just put a call out. If anybody else has questions from the audience, they want to throw them in the chat box. Now would be the time. Otherwise, we will let Chris get on the way, but I'll give you guys a couple seconds just to put those questions in if you have them. Oh, here we go. Here's another one. What concerns are there about Facebook privacy or other social media?
Well, so cyber security at a business would involve social media, and really it's going to boil down to policies, because there's nothing that you can do about those social media networks aside from choose to use them or not use them. So a policy might be something like no using Facebook at work, or on the company page, we restrict posts to the following things, and we don't post personal information. But as far as how secure Facebook is and are they taking your information, there's really nothing you can do about it. The only way to ensure that Facebook does not use your information or lose your information is to not use Facebook. And that goes with any service. So any service that you don't have direct control over, you basically gauge it by who's using that service. So if you're using a cloud storage solution that's used by the Royal Bank of Canada, then it's probably pretty safe. but social networks are a big target for data theft. One of the things I'll add to the toolkit is there's a website. I'll even just say it here, and you might go look it up. It's called pwned.com. So it's like the word owned, but with a P instead of an O. And if you put your email address in there, or maybe it's you've been pwned, but if you just do the word owned with a P at the start, you'll find the site. You put your email address in there, and it'll tell you if your email address has been compromised. And it will probably even tell you where it was compromised, what service it was compromised on. So that's a good way to check and see if different social networks that you've been using have lost your data. Just recently, Zoom itself just lost a bunch of emails because of an attack. So the only way to truly protect yourself is not use a service. The other way is to make sure that you have good passwords. But again, if they have a breach internally, there's nothing you can do about that.
Awesome. I just looked up that website and threw it in the chat for anybody who is interested in following up. I'm not seeing any other questions here so far. Thank you very much, Chris, for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. We will be back with the NSBA webinar series on Friday. And I'm just pulling up. We will be featuring, where is my, Tracy Arno from Essence Talent Solutions. And she'll be speaking on business changing, ? Start with your employees. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you on Friday.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Andrew.